Good morning, members. Thank you for tuning up this morning's Planning Committee meeting. Today's meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast by way of the Council's internet site. The image and sound recordings may also be used for training purposes within the Council. As you will see from the agenda papers, generally the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of these images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. Proposed public speakers have been made aware of the broadcasting arrangements prior to this meeting. Would members please use their microphones to contribute to the meeting, and please remember to switch off the microphones when you have finished. Members dialing in remotely, please turn on your cameras for the duration of the committee as requested by the Planning Department. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using any mobile devices during the committee and that any devices are on silent. We have two apologies, Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Jordan. And Councillor Howells. Sorry, Councillor Howell. Declarations of interest. Are any members wishing to make declarations of interest, and if so, on which matter? No.
Sorry, Chair. One of the items, I believe, is from a fellow councillor. I just wasn't sure what the protocol was for us as a committee when there's, or I believe it's a fellow councillor. I just wonder what the protocol was on for that matter, please.
Okay. So everything's fine. Yeah, everything's fine. As long as you're open minds. Okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, yes. Okay, thank you.
Nothing being prejudged. Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Right, we have the minutes of the meeting of the previous meeting, page 3. No matters arising on that. Right, we have the planning. Item 1 on the Monbank has now been removed from this agenda. Yeah, you could.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just so councillors are aware, the Monbank application has been deferred. There was a drafting error with the boundaries of the wards, which resulted in the members for Apêl being consulted on the application, where in fact the boundaries were amended to Stow Hill. So now we are undertaking that consultation with the Stow Hill members and the relevant other consultees that base their responses based on ward. So we're deferring that with the intention to report it to the September meeting.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 1. Application number 25-0082. That's on page 36 to 42. The site is 90 Western Avenue, Newport, MP 203QZ. It's within the Alterine ward, and the proposal is for a double-storey and single-storey rear extension. The ward members are Councillor Pat Druitt, Matthew Evans and Councillor Fairweather. The main considerations are design and residential amenity. The recommendation would be to grant with conditions. The presenting officer is Adam Foote, Principal Planning Officer. We have two public speakers, Mr Habib, Mr Connolly, and the ward member speaking on behalf is Councillor Evans. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the application this application has been reported to the Planning Committee at the request of Councillor Evans. The reason given for the request are that the proposal would have an overbearing impact on the neighbours at number 88 Western Avenue, and that the proposal would not enhance the area. The current submission has been amended and reduced in scale since the original in order to address concerns raised by the Council regarding the scale and bulk of the originally proposed scheme. The primary considerations are the impact on the character and appearance of the application site and surrounding area, and the residential amenity and privacy of neighbours. So the application site consists of a detached dwelling sat in a large plot located on Western Avenue. The property is set at a slightly lower level than the dwelling to the north due to the topography of Western Avenue, which is steeper at the northern end. The dwelling is set back from the road frontage and benefits from a front garden area and driveway. To the side of the dwelling, a gate provides pedestrian access into the rear garden. Beyond the rear garden, the M4 runs adjacent to the site's western boundary. The dwelling is finished in render with a hipped and tiled roof. Properties in the vicinity are of a similar scale and design, and many have been altered or extended. The application property also benefits from existing extensions, which are shown on screen currently. This application seeks planning permission for a single part two-storey extension on the rear of the dwelling. The proposed two-storey extension would project approximately 3.5 metres from the rear elevation of the host property and would be approximately 4.5 metres in width, with a total height of approximately 10.1 metres to the eaves. The proposed single-storey extension would project approximately 5.9 metres in depth from the rear elevation of the main dwelling and would measure approximately 6.8 metres in width. It would have a flat roof and reach a height of approximately 3.15 metres. The extensions would provide the property with additional bedroom and ensuite bathroom at first floor level and kitchen and dining room to the ground floor. One new side-facing window at ground floor level would be installed in the northern side elevation of the existing dwelling, whilst the proposed extensions would be served by new rear-facing windows both at ground and first floor levels. Externally, the proposed materials include brick, render and concrete roof tiles and UPVC framed windows and doors. The development would be located on the rear elevation with limited visibility from the public realm. The design is considered to be acceptable and in keeping with the character of the existing dwelling and wider area, avoiding any adverse visual impact that would prejudice the character of the area. In respect of residential amenity, no concern is raised in relation to the single-storey element. This is considered to be acceptable. In relation to this two-storey extension, this has been set in from the original submission, moving it away from the common boundary with the neighbouring property. The extent of the projection, in conjunction with the relationship with the neighbouring property, has been assessed against the adopted supplementary planning guidance for household development and meets both the daylight tests contained within the guidance. Therefore, when considering this, no unacceptable impact has been identified that would prejudice the living conditions of neighbouring occupiers. Yeah, to conclude, when considering the visual and impact of the extensions as proposed and the impact upon the living conditions of neighbouring occupiers, no unacceptable impact has been identified, and therefore this application is recommended for approval subject to conditions, including those to protect the amenity of neighbouring occupiers, requiring obscure glazing, and that the single-storey flat roof element would not be used as a raised platform. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could I open up this meeting now for councillors to speak? Oh, sorry.
Apologies, yeah, there were some late representations included on this application. One has not been included. If we had support from one of the councillors, local councillors, for this scheme. However, the reasons have not been included within the report due to the sensitive nature of their content. Bear with me just one second. And the additional late representations report has been circulated with local members. So, but yeah, that's in essence the extent of the report. Oh, we do have some site photos. Apologies. So we will note from the rear elevation the current scale and form of the property and the existing conservatory extension. On the photo on the left-hand side, you'll notice that the neighbouring property also benefits from a two-storey extension that is set closer to the common boundary than the proposed scheme that we're considering here. And again, just some more site photos for context. Thank you.
Thank you. We have the first public speaker, Mr. Habib.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm here as both a family member and a professional who works with autistic residents, and I studied clinical psychology at university. But more importantly, I'm here as the older sister of my 18-year-old sister who has severe autism and currently lives in our family home in a box room. At 18, my sister is not a child anymore. She is a young adult navigating a world that is already overwhelming for someone with autism. Her current living space is not just small, it's unsuitable. It offers no privacy, no room to grow, and no proper space to support her unique sensory and emotional needs, and for an autistic young woman that can have serious consequences. Autism isn't just a matter of social difficulty, it's a neurodevelopmental condition that impacts every aspect of a person's life, from how they sleep, communicate, and emotionally regulate to how they develop independence. For someone like my sister who struggles with changes in routine, noise sensitivity and overstimulation, having an appropriately designed and spacious environment is not a luxury, it's a clinical and psychological necessity. As someone who works professionally with autistic people, I know the difference that the right space can make. In autism-friendly practice, the physical environment is a critical part of care. A safe, calm and private room allows individuals to regulate their emotions, reduce anxiety, and begin to develop life skills such as dressing independently, managing personal hygiene, or simply having a moment of quiet away from others. Right now, that isn't possible in her room. Because of the importance of environment in supporting autistic individuals, we initially requested a larger room for her, one that included a large space for her to sing, dance and make music, which is a key part of her sensory regulation. Music calms her and helps her express herself when words fail. It would have been a huge step towards independence and emotional well-being. Our original extension plan included 2 adjacent bedrooms, one for my sister and one for myself. This idea was that I would continue supporting her now and into the future in a practical, present way. As an older sister, I've taken on many caring responsibilities, and having a dedicated room near her would have made that role more sustainable, especially during times of crisis or change, which are often extremely difficult for autistic people to manage. Due to objections from neighbours, for example, light and privacy, despite the fact their windows already open onto a wide view of our garden, that proposal was taken away from us. We've had to drastically reduce the original proposal. We have compromised. We have redesigned. The second bedroom has been removed. The music space is gone. What remains is a modest room that gives my sister more than she has now, but still less than she truly needs. This shows that we have tried to be considerate, collaborative and reasonable. We're not asking for anything excessive. We're simply trying to adapt the home to meet the real daily needs of a vulnerable adult. This extension is about inclusion and equality. It's about recognising that a young woman with complex needs deserves more than a cramped corner to live in. She deserves the same opportunity as anyone else to have privacy, space, and an environment that helps her thrive. I urge you to consider this is not just a planning application, but a step towards giving an autistic adult the quality of life she deserves in her own home. I ask to look beyond minor inconveniences and support this extension on the grounds of compassion, necessity, and social responsibility. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to come and speak today, and also for agreeing that my most recent comments have been made available to members of the committee in full. Also, thanks to Councillor Evans for his support. I'm happy that my written comments address most of the issues that I believe were omitted from the Planning Officer's report, so I won't restate them, but I will allude to them. I will, however, briefly focus on what I might consider to be the overbearing impact. Firstly, the imposing dimensions of the proposal, with both double and single stories still projecting beyond our back wall. Secondly, more specifically, is the height of the roofs, with the double story still being higher than our roof, despite number 90 being at a lower elevation. And thirdly, the proximity to our boundary. The Planning Officer has appeared to give some latitude from the guidelines to all the relevant dimensions, and this might be understandable if the property had none or very little development, but that isn't the case. I therefore think the impact should best be described as a perception of becoming overshadowed and boxed in, especially from our rear living room and on our main patio, and this is also summed up in the guideline as insensitively designed house extensions can substantially reduce natural light, privacy and perceived space in neighbours' homes and gardens. In terms of light, regarding the 45-degree test, I have tested it for myself, and I would say that it is marginal, but it's also debatable. I should also state that in the equivalent position where we would be overshadowed, number 90 has solar panels. The issue of privacy is addressed in my comments. To state that this proposal would not be out of keeping relative to other properties in the neighbourhood is incorrect, even in its current form. I therefore trust that you will give due consideration to the immediate impact on us and the potential for setting a precedent for future developments in the area in the longer term. Most of the detached properties are already generously but proportionally extended, including ours. The previous double and single-storey application for a detached property in Western Avenue was refused, and a more modest single-storey proposal was resubmitted. I hope you will also bear in mind that there are alternatives and choices that can be made within the scope of the current footprint at number 90 Western Avenue, and for the applicant to still achieve his objectives of a larger kitchen, a larger dining room and an ensuite bedroom. Indeed, this may be already in the thinking with the addition of a planned new fixed staircase up to the roof space. I'm also going to take the opportunity to respond to the notes that were additional to this meeting. Officer response to late representations. 2.1, the Party Wall Act is a separate legislation and a civil matter. 2.4, excuse me. Oops. The ability or otherwise to construct scaffold to facilitate building work is a civil matter. This is confirmed in the officer report. The guidelines state the Council recommends that a side extension be set in at least 1 metre from the side property boundary. Applying this would, of course, upset the plans. But aren't the guidelines supposed to be considered equally? And I've already mentioned the latitude already given to this application. This report and recommendation is therefore advising you to make a conscious decision to ignore your own guidelines and place upon us a potential situation of dispute which will incur costs. 2.5. Other comments appear to restate concerns previously expressed and reported. These concerns are considered in the officer assessment, and evaluation is made having regard to both the LDP and SPG on house extensions. Officers have addressed the suggestion of overdevelopment in the published report. With respect to the other concerns...
Could I remind you have 30 seconds
is that
left
it?
to sum up?
Time's up?
30 seconds left to sum up.
Oh, sum up? Okay. Okay. I'll give that point a miss. Whilst the building is relatively large and has already been extended, the previous dwelling is set in a large plot. That's what the officer says. This might address the suggestion of overdevelopment, but it doesn't rationalise it in context of what's already on the plot and what will further be added to the plot. Finally, I will add that 2 of the 3 ward councillors have expressed concern about overdevelopment in the immediate area. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much. Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I thank the committee for giving me the opportunity to speak against this application. I can't remember the last time I appeared here, but it was several years ago at least. And secondly, can I apologise? There's a reference in there to me talking about 11 cars parked outside, but apparently it's 7, so I misheard it. So apologies for that in the report. I don't usually get involved in neighbourhood issues, but I do think there's a principle on what is acceptable and what I consider to have an overbearing impact. The property at number 90 has already been extended, has a large brick outbuilding at the bottom of the garden and a large conservatory projecting at least 11 metres into the garden. If approved, this would be for an additional 2-storey rear extension as well as a single-storey rear extension. The proposed 2-storey extension will project approximately 3.5 metres from the rear elevation, which is also more than recommended in the SPG. I am not a surveyor, but my wife is, albeit recently retired, and she has questioned the accuracy of the natural light tests. She said from the drawings it was incredibly marginal, so I would like clarification that officers have been to the properties to verify them independently. I do have sympathy and empathy for the case for autistic concerns of the family, and that is obviously regrettable, but we have to look at the planning application here today. Finally, having read the report a few times, I'm afraid I can't find any reference to how this will enhance the area. We often have planning applications which come through about what enhances the area. So where are the additional biodiversity proposals? Even the conclusion states that it will not result in significant harm, hardly a ringing endorsement. So please reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Could the officer please comment?
Yes, so just in response to your query in whether someone has been to the property to undertake those tests, yes, they have. A site visit was undertaken. You can see from the photos shared on screen that someone has been. In response to the daylight tests, like I say, they have been undertaken. You'll note from the block plan and the elevation plan as shown, the splays. So these are our adopted standards that we utilise for consistency across all applications. They are guidance only, but when considering this within the planning balance, we consider that the application, or that the proposed development would not have an unacceptable impact upon the living conditions of neighbouring occupiers, and we consider that there is compliance with the adopted standards. When looking at the splay on the block plan also, that does, where you have the splay, and it's almost meets the corner of the proposed extension, that element of the extension is at single storey. So the 2-storey element is set back further. So again, from the position of the local planning authority, we're satisfied that this application is acceptable. It would not have an unacceptable impact upon the living conditions of neighbouring occupiers, and that's why it is recommended for approval, regardless of the personal circumstances that have been discussed here today. We consider the planning merits of this scheme to be acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could you open the floor, please, Chair?
Just for clarification, so the officers have been there to independently verify these daylight tests then?
They've been to site and the tests have been applied. So yes, we're satisfied that the plans are accurate and that these tests would be representative of the impact.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. That's it. I open the floor for questions from the committee.
So in this, it's providing another bedroom. So does that mean that there's got to be another parking space provided, because there's no mention of that in the application?
No, the parking requirement wouldn't be altered. The adopted parking standards would be for a maximum of 3 spaces. So we wouldn't make people provide more and more parking per bedroom once you exceed that limit of 3.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed the comment on section 5. Where has it gone? Head of City Services and Highways. The additional bedroom do not result in any increased parking requirements, following on for Councillor Perkins. As long as the house remains a single private dwelling. There are therefore no objections to the highway raised grounds, but I don't see that as a condition in the conditions raised.
That would require a change of use in itself, so that would be development requiring consent, so we would have control over that in any case.
So what you're saying, if it goes to a HMO or to flats or anything like that, they'd have to come back to planning?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. The other thing is, I got 2 others. One is the original footprint of the property. Looking at the extensions, and on that proposed plan, there's nothing about the other development at the bottom of the garden either. There's a brick building at the bottom of the garden, isn't there?
Yes, there is an outbuilding at the rear of the plot.
Okay, compared with the original footprint of the building, when it was built, what percentage of increase has the property had since then?
I don't have that information to hand.
Because what concerns me is the amenity left on the property.
So with this, as you'll see from the site photographs, there's ample amenity space left for this property. You know, we are talking about a large plot. They have a generous garden area. So whilst they don't know the proportion, whilst they don't know the full extent of the proportions or the percentage of the increase, we're satisfied that there is ample amenity space here. You'll note from the block plan on screen that it is a large plot. They do have quite a sufficient amount of garden area. I think one of the speakers, I apologise, I'm not sure which one, noted that the conservatory extension had quite a significant length, and obviously that doesn't take up the full width of the plot, nor does it take up the full length, so we are more than satisfied that there's ample amenity space.
It concerns me that could be an overdevelopment in regards to that particular plot. The last one I got is on the next property. there's a development, although it's relevant to this one, is the fact that they've developed it right up to the boundary wall. Is that correct?
So is this in relation to the property shown on screen currently?
It's relation to the comments made in regards to the development of this particular property, in regards to comments made about being developed right up to the boundary wall.
I understand.
But other properties adjacent to this property as developed right up to the boundary wall. So I don't see that there can be really any adverse effect, should we say.
No, so as you can see, the neighbouring property has a two-storey extension within close proximity to the common boundary. This property has a single-storey extension as existing, within close proximity to the common boundary. Whilst that would be replaced with a larger single-storey extension close to the common boundary, we don't see that that would have any adverse impact. And that the two-storey element in this case has been set in from the boundary at the request of the local planning officers dealing with the application in order to remedy concerns of design and the impact on neighbours. So that has been considered, and that's why we're considering this revised smaller scheme, but we consider that the impact from this both visually and in terms of residential amenity would be acceptable.
What side access are there, or is there going to be with the new development then?
So there is access available currently, and as you'll note from the proposed rear elevations, there is still a space retained to the side. So there's an existing pedestrian gate and access, and there would still be that space maintained to provide access to that rear amenity area.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rheoli?
Thank you, Chairman. Some of the questions have already been covered, so I won't go back over those just yet. I'm concerned about the close proximity. One of the speakers did mention it's within a metre of the adjacent house. Is that correct? And are we compromising in any way our standards and our, the policies that we follow?
So in response, there is a existing single-storey rear extension that is located within the same proximity. So the proposed extension is just deeper in essence, but there is already that relationship that exists. And I don't see that there's any conflict between the adopted standards of the council that would result in us not supporting this application, and that ultimately that is why it's recommended for approval.
Okay, following up, Chairman, I hear what the officer is saying. Do you agree that it's a metre or maybe less than a metre? Irrelevant of what the other side's done, we have no control over that. I can only speak about what's before us today. So, are you confirming that it is a metre or less to the boundary of the adjacent property?
So I don't have that measurement of the set-off of the extension to the boundary, but if I could draw your attention to the proposed, the existing and proposed plans as shown, the distance off of the boundary for the single-storey element would not be any different to the existing. The difference is the depth that it projects to the rear. So, irrespective of that distance, that's a relationship that does, again to a lesser degree, does exist currently. And if I just go back to the site photos, you'll note that the neighbouring property also then has built to the, to a similar relationship with the boundary. So therefore, we would not consider that to be out of character with the pattern of development within the area.
And can we go back to the parking provision? I understand that, yes, if it went to HMO, that would be a different change of use. But that would be slightly sort of trying to close the door after the horses bolted here. I'd like to see a condition placed on it whereby the recommendation would encompass maybe an extra parking space being provided. I see that we have approximately 7 cars at this property now on what's considered to be a very busy road. But I'd like to see an extra condition in there that would offset anything else happening in the future. And I think we need to future plan, future proof the development in some way.
So the property has, as sort of alluded to, does have a significant amount of off-street parking to the front. We would not be sort of able to impose a condition of that nature given the extent of the current parking. We would only seek to ensure that for new development that parking would be in line with our adopted standards, which would require a maximum of a minimum of 3 spaces for a property of this size. So it would be up to 3 spaces. That condition, in my view, would not meet the tests as set out by the Welsh Government circular, and would be not sort of, it would not encourage that to be included. And if it were, I would not be sure of the enforceability of it, and if it was to be appealed, I would expect that to be removed by any planning inspector.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry, can I just come back in with one more thing? The only thing that we could do would be to impose a condition requiring for 3 spaces to be maintained at the property, because currently the existing level of parking could reduce below that without our control. That would be the only reasonable condition we could do, that we could attach, as to ensure compliance with our currently adopted standards. So if that would alleviate concerns around parking, that would be an option, but to condition that sort of 7 or 8 spaces are maintained, we would have no grounding for that.
I think that would go some way in helping. I'm not going to make any further comment though at this stage. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't see any more hands raised. Speakers? Can I now move to the vote on the officer's recommendation, please, to grant the application?
Could I ask for it to be granted with... Chair, could I ask for it to be granted with the preservation of the 3 parking spaces which the officer is suggesting that he wishes to impose? Or he wishes to put before us today?
Okay. Yeah, that's fine, thank you. Do you have a second?
Okay.
Yeah. So All those for? Right, yeah, we've got Councillor Perkins as a seconder. Councillor Rheoli. Okay. Sorry, right. All those for? Looks like unanimous. Anybody against? Oh, and myself, sorry. Anybody against? Obviously not. Okay, that's carried. Granted. Thank you. Moving on, item 2 on the agenda. This is application number 25/0261. This is on page 43 to 55. The site is 4 Ponty Mason Close, Rogerstone, Newport, NP10 9HG. And the ward is in the Rogerstone West. Ward members are Councillor Forsey and Councillor Reynolds. The proposal is a resubmission of a retrospective application to retain the terraced patio areas. The main considerations as residential amenities. The officer's recommendation was to refuse the application. The presenting officer is Adam Foote, Principal Planning Officer. We have a public speaker in support of the application, Mr. Grocott. And also the ward member speaking online, Councillor Forsey.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this application is recommended for refusal, and it's being reported to the Planning Committee at the request of Councillor Forsey, who has requested that if it were to be refused, then it should be reported to the Planning Committee on the grounds of transparency and because of the planning history and unusual characteristics of the site. So this application seeks retrospective planning permission to retain a terraced areas at within the rear garden of 4 Ponty Mason Close. This is a resubmission following a previous refusal. What I'm going to do is, if we go through the slides and the photos first, so that members are aware of the context of the site, and then we'll cover the main issues then to follow. So the current slide shows the previous block plan with the property located here. There's a patio area. There's an existing retaining wall with an area of relatively level ground before an increased topography beyond, going up to the rear garden. And you can see that in the lower image. So you've got the rear of the dwelling here, a level area of patio beyond the rear elevation of the dwelling, a raised, relatively level area of garden space before going into the incline. The top image there is indicative of what the garden area was previously, and the lower area, the lower image, shows the what has been done, but is showing us the proposed development that's for consideration today. And the top image on screen shows the different areas that have been created through the that are already on site, and the lower image shows the section through with the mitigation as proposed with planters to obscure views into the neighbouring garden areas. So I'll just take you through some of the photographs to show members what has been done on site. So the patio area at the bottom, which has the patio set on, was existing. That's not what's been undertaken. The retaining wall was existing, and there was that garden level that's shown, if you can see where my cursor is, it's referred to as Tier A on the plans. That level was relatively consistent. It has been amended slightly. However, that was a relatively level area as existing. However, it has been significantly formalised with the creation of this patio. The main changes to the ground levels are within the further upper sections as shown. Here we have the top image is taken from online. It shows this, it's from the sale history of the property and gives an indication of the previous slope of the garden and the topography in the area. And then obviously the lower image is currently and what's sought for retention. Again, the top image is taken from the sale history and shows that topography. And what we've tried to do through the photographs is to give an indication of that change. So you can see the change that has been constructed within the lower image. Again, it's the same concept that this image here is shown from the sale history, and this is what's been constructed. And again, so you can see this level was present and has just been formalised by that space. This obviously shows the view from the top area of the garden. And then what you can see from the images to follow is the impact that the developments had in relation to the neighbouring property and the level of overlooking that it affords the occupiers of the property into the private rear amenity space of the neighbouring property. And then these images are taken from the neighbouring property. So just to give members an overview of where our assessment has been drawn from. And again, the vantage points here shown from the constructed terraces into the neighbouring property. And then these are taken from the neighbouring garden. So I'll just take us back to the proposed plan. So hopefully that's useful in terms of site context. So the majority of this submission remains similar to that as assessed under the previous and refused application. However, one of the key differences are the removal of the proposed privacy screens and timber fencing, and the proposed privacy screens that would have been constructed with timber fencing and opaque glass on tier B, and the addition of planting on tiers B and tier A with the boundary with number 3 Pontymason Close. In terms of the retrospective works within the garden of number 4 Pontymason Close, the first plateau, as I said, there was an element of there was a relatively level area in that location. Works have been undertaken to level it further, and the area has been formalised by means of laying of a patio and balustrades. The applicant has argued that due to the minimal extent of these level changes, that they should be excluded from the proposal and should not be for consideration. However, we have considered the development as a whole, so we do not share that view that area should be excluded from the consideration. The primary concern relating to this application is the impact of the development upon the living conditions of neighbouring occupiers, namely an overbearing impact and a level of overlooking that goes beyond what could be reasonably expected within a private rear garden area. The development has created terraced areas that have formalised the areas of the garden and change levels that afford occupiers of the application site views into the private garden of neighbouring properties, with an unacceptable and unneighbourly development that, in the view of the local planning authority, is unacceptable. The proposed mitigation consists of planters to obscure the views into the neighbouring garden. This is not considered to be sufficient as to overcome the harm that has been identified. In the assessment of this application, we've also given weight to a recent appeal decision at a different location, however, with similar constraints. That appeal was dismissed by a planning inspector. Now, they concluded that this is a different case, but I'm just giving context, that the plateau has created a larger, more usable space, likely to be used more frequently and for longer periods of time, exacerbating the perception of being overlooked. Although the development has sought to create a safe area for the enjoyment of the occupiers, the level of overlooking, particularly in the summer months, when the patio area would likely be more intensively used, results in a significant loss of privacy for the occupiers of the neighbouring property. And that's exactly what we consider this application to do, just to have an unacceptable adverse impact upon the level of, upon the living conditions of neighbouring occupiers through an overbearing impact that affords the occupiers an unacceptable level of overlooking into areas that where you should be able to expect a reasonable level of privacy. As already stated, we've considered an application for a very similar development to this already on this site, and we have refused it. So from our view, we're taking a consistent approach in that we do not consider that the mitigation as proposed is sufficient to overcome the identified harm. So, thank you. So therefore, the application is recommended to be refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. Could I have the first speaker, please, Mr. Coker?
Thank you, Chair. Could you put up drawing SD 99102C, the block plan with the colours, please? Right. This application is only made because there is one area of the site that is raised. All the content that has just been said by the planning officer is actually dealt with in two pieces of primary Welsh Government legislation. Class F, Part 1, Schedule 2, permitted development for hard services within the curtilage of a dwelling house, consisting of the provision of the curtilage of a dwelling house hard surface for any purpose incidental to the enjoyment of that dwelling house. In other words, they've got no say on whether it's a patio or a garden. Secondly, the Town and Country Planning Act, as amended, Part 1, states raised in relation to a platform means raised to a height of greater than 30 centimetres. On that drawing, you can see there is only two parts that are raised by more than 30 centimetres. The whole premise of their argument is flawed. On Tier A, there is no part of that application that is raised by 30 centimetres. It is clearly marked and the sections clearly show it. On Tier B, there is only one part that is raised by 30 centimetres, and that is underneath the planter. The reason for the planter is to stop access to that area, so there is no point. Right. Our application has said that no part of the application would be raised by 300 millimetres. On the drawing showing Tier A, none of it is adjusted. On Tier B, there is 5 square metres adjusted. Tier C is confirmed to be acceptable to the Planning Committee. There is a degree in this report where terms are used to mislead everybody. They're used in relation to Part A, or Tier A, that the area has been levelled off. It hasn't been raised, it's been lowered. This is permitted development. This has no bearing on planning and no consent is needed. This is actually a false statement in the report. In Tier B, there is 5 square metres raised, but that is completely covered by a planter. Again, there is no access to the raised area. On the area where this is concerned, if you look at the block plan, there are 15 houses with the same degree of gardening done. They live on the side of a hill in Ponty Mason Lane, and all the gardens have tiers. That is the only way they can live. They live on the side of a mountain. This is fundamental flaw in the report. The planning authority cannot overturn Welsh Government legislation. The patios are permitted and the ground can be adjusted in accordance with the legislation I've quoted. The second element of the report is also misleading because the reliance of comments regarding the objections are based on a previous owner. The owner of number 3 has left. There is a new owner, and the content of their report is based on the comments from the previous owner of number 3. So it means that the vast majority of their comments are actually redundant, even though they've put it in there. They then called the change of use from garden to patio. There is no change of use. The legislation clearly states you can use any part of your garden as a patio at any time you like. The report then says that the screening will fail. Well, the screening won't fail. All they need to do is add a condition to say that it will be maintained and it will be regularly maintained for a period of time. They can even offer a temporary approval on a 3-year basis so that they can check and make sure the planting is in place. But perhaps the most important thing is the false claim that they make about using the appeal details at 6 Ridgeway Crescent. These are flawed. That garden was raised 1.95 metres. This garden isn't raised, it's lowered. They're actually using things that don't apply in this case. It's actually a terrible report. Also, in the case at 6 Ridgeway, screening would have been deemed to be acceptable by the inspector, but it wasn't presented to him. Okay. So I would just like to ask that on the grounds that the area isn't raised, it's flat, it is a patio in the garden, it should be noticed. I should ask that the committee either visit site to witness this, because the levels won't change. This refusal cannot change the levels. They are as they were. It is only because they addressed that they got an opinion on this. It is not the levels that you create the overlooking. It is already that way. So, thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. I call upon the opposite.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, with regards to the works that, obviously, works have been undertaken and the levels on site have been altered, the applicant has requested retrospective planning consent for these works. We are considering the impact of those works and the impact that has upon the neighbouring occupiers. We consider these to be unacceptable. The levels on site have changed and they have been formalised. As I tried to make clear within my initial comments that the previous appeal decision was for a different site. It's a similar form of development, and I was trying to give context in relation to how an inspector has viewed this previously. We consider this to be one development that we are considering because the applicants have submitted a planning application seeking consent for this development. Again, we've assessed it. We consider that the views that it affords into the private garden areas of the neighbouring properties are unacceptable, and that's really the essence of this case. So, yes, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Can you open up to the committee to... sorry. Oh, sorry. Yes, I forgot. Councillor Forty, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I asked for this case to be considered by the committee because that I felt that it was rather unusual. I've served previously on planning committee and observed quite a lot of cases, but I haven't seen one like this where the facts are actually disputed. The facts about how high, how wide, how tall something is, they're usually agreed upon, and then it's a debate about whether they're acceptable or not. But in this case, we seem to be disputing the measurements of the site. I haven't been able to come to a conclusion on this, and I don't seek to persuade the committee in either direction. I've just found this entirely confusing, and because of the dispute, I'm glad that these issues can be discussed in full and in public. So I thank the committee for their considerations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have a raised hand, Councillor Rheoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've looked at this application via the report before us, and it is a difficult one because I do get the overlooking part. I get that. What I'm reluctant to do at this moment in time would be to actually have this sort of completely and utterly ripped up. I would rather try and find a way around, instead of destroying, but around the screening application of this. Looking at the photographs, and I think they're actually very, very well presented. I'm of the opinion, on this occasion, I'd like to see a site visit so I can actually experience, do an in-depth search on the heights and the measurements there. But then once I'm on that site, I will be able to understand the full extent of the overbearingness as it's been described. The extent of wood screening really help this. And so for me, Chairman, I'd like to see a visit to the site on this occasion and then bring it back, and I would feel more confident to be able to make a decision.
Thank you, Councillor. Your comments about the site visit are noted, but I'd like to hear the rest of questions from the committee first.
Absolutely, Chair.
There was mention by the speaker about other properties have been developed on a similar lines. Can the officer tell us, is that correct or not?
I don't have any information in respect of a similar development on neighbouring properties in this area, so I can't comment on the accuracy of that. In this scenario, we are just considering the development as proposed and its impacts.
The second tier, tier B was it, is claimed to be overlooking the other property. What's the distance between that tier and the actual property itself?
In this case, so you do have an element of overlooking. Sorry, let me just get a photo to demonstrate that. So our conclusion is that we have an element of overlooking towards the property, but also it's within their garden area. So that because the development's built up to that common boundary, that distance is very, very small and is almost immediate. So if you're stood on the tiers that we have, and because of the levels, the level of overlooking is quite acute. So regardless of the distance from the property, the distance within to the neighbouring private rear amenity space is quite immediate.
Chair, going to the next level, which is Tier C, is that going to be remain as a garden, or is that now going to be a patio as well?
So I think it's important to note that all of the area is sort of garden. It would still be classified as garden area. So when we're looking at the sort of that upper tier, you can see that there's been a, it's sort of. Sorry, can I just clarify? In respect of your question, are you asking about the finish on the ground? Because essentially it comprises of two separate elements. You have the slope and the sort of essentially stepping stones that have the gravel finish, and then there's the sort of decked area that cuts the corner in like almost a quarter circle. So can I just clarify what the question is?
Final tier, Tier C, what is that going to be? Is that going to be a hard covering, or is that going to be a garden, a lawn, a vegetable patch, or what?
So what you have is, so if I can show in the block plan, you've this area here is a level sort of platform that you can sit on, and then this area here is a slope. So if I go back to the photograph, you can see the level area here with the balustrade, and then you have this area here is a slope.
A slope of what? Is that?
Oh, it's sort of a gravel finish, like a chipping stone finish.
So in effect, by changing level B and C to a lawn, but classed then as a garden, there could be no impact or objections in regards to overlooking. It could be used as a lawn.
No, I think in respect of this, because where the application the application site has been levelled and formalised, we have essentially level platforms. So irrespective of the finish, so whether it's a lawn, chipping, or a patio, regardless, we would consider that these are now much more formalised, more usable spaces, and the level of overlooking from these areas is of an unacceptable level.
That seems to be silly to me.
Thank you. My opinion, looking at it at the minute, is what I can gather from the officers is it's formalising a seating area, a platform, where otherwise it wouldn't be used as often. That's what I was thinking. I was just answering.
Chair, just to clarify, so the whole of the curtilage is what we would consider to be garden and would have been usable by any of the occupiers of the property. The development that's been undertaken is the change in levels, which you can see is demonstrated and has been undertaken on the photographs in front of you. And what we're saying is that the works that have been undertaken have facilitated a greater level of overlooking of the neighbouring garden and property than previously existed, and we're saying that loss of privacy is what is unacceptable.
Councillor Cox?
Oh, thank you. Okay. You want to come back? I want to come back on that. Oh. If, for instance, we refuse the application, therefore it has to be demolished, there's nothing stopping the applicant lawning the whole lot back to the original garden. Am I correct?
That is correct, but that would also require the changing of the levels again back to the original levels, which didn't impose as much overlooking as we're saying it does now.
We haven't approved this application yet. So what I'm saying is we refuse the application and then, not saying, just theoretically, refuse the application and then they can actually put it back to the original state, which we're saying they must do if it's refused, and then there's nothing stopping them lawning it. Am I correct?
You are correct, but to put it back to its original state, you'd be changing the levels back to previous lower levels, higher levels, whatever, whatever the changes would be, and we're saying that those levels didn't incur or didn't produce as much overlooking as the changes that have been done now. So if we were to refuse this application, obviously the applicant would have the right of appeal, but there wouldn't be an automatic requirement for them to put it back to how it was. We would need to pursue an enforcement notice to do that.
Once that is done, Chair, there's nothing stopping them lawning the garden, the whole lot.
Yes, that is correct, but the level would be different, so it wouldn't facilitate the same impact. So regardless of the finish, it's not the finish that's disputed, it's the impact.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Cox, you wanted to ask a question?
I just want a bit of an explanation, please. That looking at that image, that the gardens on either side seem to slope away quite steeply. Am I correct? The level C is obviously raised to a certain height, and on either side the ground is much lower. Has that been built out like that, or is it a natural feature?
So the topography of the land as was prior to the development, the gardens do slope.
So it's not that height hasn't been built up artificially.
There's a slope to the land. I mean, if you look, sorry, if you can see where my cursor is here, like you can see houses here, all the gardens in this area slope away from them and increase in height, essentially. Okay. The difference is, in my view, is exacerbated here by the creation of these levels. So that's where that sort of difference looks to be more pronounced, to create those flat tiers. Whereas previously you had more of a gentle slope, now we have these sort of more engineered looking platforms.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Horton, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So on that image, just straight off on that image there we've got at the moment, the raised element on the right-hand side just below the tree. So would it be fair to say that they've got a very, very solid view of the garden we're looking at? Would that be fair to say, looking at the picture?
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, so that's essentially a lot of essentially the essence of our argument is that the view from the tiers...
Sorry, not tiers, sorry. The neighbour, the one which we're saying they can obviously look into the garden of, the elevated platform which got the sort of the brown barrier with the tree, so that's above tier A, is that right?
Oh, apologies. Yeah, I understand. Let me just go back to the site photos. I believe there is an image taken from there which should be able to demonstrate that. So, yeah, if you see the image on the left.
Yeah, so where that's is there, yeah. So, yeah, my point is I've got family that live up around there, so I know how hilly and what the gardens are like up in that area. I can't see how there would be no overlooking in any way, shape or form in any of the properties. I get a point where the level A is quite close to the boundary and the one corner where we're talking about the planters is overlooking the garden. But do we have any comments, like the gentleman said, that the comments are from the previous owner who's no longer there? Have we got any comments from the new owner to see how they feel about everything?
So Just to come back on your initial point, it is accepted that there would be an element of overlooking between the gardens. That isn't disputed. The issue that's being raised here is that the extent of the development that has been undertaken results in an unacceptable impact. So we're not disputing that there's no or was not any overlooking before. It's that now it's of an unacceptable level in the view of the local planning authority.
We don't jump in there, but we don't know what it was like previously.
If I'll go back through some of the site, the sale history photos.
I know
we
have this, but we don't actually have any statements from anybody saying that it was this, that, or the other prior to this development.
So we have the sale image photos, so you can see it here on the left-hand side.
Sorry, jump in again, but we don't have any statements of anybody saying that this was unacceptable previously.
No.
Or that it was acceptable previously.
No.
So we're making an assessment, and we're making a judgment call then.
So we're making an assessment based on the development that we're considering here, and where this is a retrospective application, we have the benefit of seeing what that impact is in person. So when site visits have been undertaken, we're able to, it's not a proposed impact. We're not speculating on that. We can see what that impact is. We can see what that level of overlooking is within the site into the neighbouring properties. In response to your question about the neighbours, we do have comments from the current occupiers. They aren't raising concern to this. However, we're not making recommendations based on the whether or not neighbours object. Our role is to consider the merits of an application and make an assessment based upon that. So,
okay. So just for clarification, then, why is the screening that's been proposed unacceptable?
So we don't consider that it would remedy the harm of the overlooking, and also because of the extent of the overlooking and the relationship between the two properties, we just do not consider that that would be a sufficient solution to overcome that identified harm. Okay, so you've identified the harm, but the people that actually live there haven't. They're happy, they're comfortable and happy with the proposal. So yeah, essentially, just for context, the previous occupiers had objected to the proposal. They have now moved out. The current occupiers have not objected. Right. So there's a proposal being put forward by the people that are currently living there that have done all the work to screen it off. The people that are the neighbours who we are essentially talking about in this their privacy that we're discussing don't have a problem or haven't raised an issue with the current work scheme. Yet we're talking about putting something in place to screen it off, which they haven't even asked for. So I'm a little bit confused as to why this has come in front of committee if the current residents are comfortable in the property which is being overlooked. The people whose property we're talking about have proposed to screen everything off as well. It just seems a bit futile, the conversation. If it's granted with conditions, I'm sure if this come about in front of planning today as a fresh application, there would have been some conditions put in place to screen it off. Would that not be correct? So our role isn't to assess whether or not, we don't make our assessments based on whether or not neighbours object. We make an assessment based on the impact. So just because someone hasn't objected doesn't mean that we should just allow it, equally in the way that if we have an application where people object to it, we don't automatically refuse it. They're material considerations that we weigh in the planning balance. However, just because someone has objected or has not objected doesn't overcome the identified harm that the development.
That's one question then. How did this whole thing arise? Was it the neighbours that raised this as an issue, or was it the people that have done the work retrospectively put a planning application in?
So we had an enforcement complaint about the development, and it was identified that there was unauthorised works carried out, and the occupiers of the property then elected to submit a planning application. So one was refused, and this is now a resubmission.
So can I just, what was the, so the issue was the raising and the lowering of the ground? Was that the ultimate problem?
Gavin, could I allow Tracy to intervene and answer questions?
I can't see Tracy, that's all.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. So, members, just to remind you, obviously we will make a recommendation based on our professional consideration of an application. If members consider that the fact that the neighbouring property doesn't object to the application is a consideration that you want to give weight to, you're entitled to do that. We, as Adam has explained, we do not have to have an objection from a neighbouring property to make a judgment, in our professional opinion, that this is unacceptable from a loss of privacy perspective. But if you, as members, decide that actually the lack of an objection is significant, then obviously you can make your own decisions. Obviously, Councillor Rheoli has suggested that there's a site visit for you to see the impact for yourself. Appreciate it. Sometimes it's difficult to see what the actual impact is from photographs, but obviously that's also been put forward, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rheoli, you've got your hand up again to speak?
Has Councillor Horton finished yet? Because he was interrupted, and I was quite enjoying his...
Thanks, Bill, for letting me know.
The only final thing I will say is the image on the right-hand side clearly shows the sort of the level difference in the properties. So I know we've spoken on the topography of the place quite heavily, but it is on a hill. It's one of those. This is one of those scenarios which is always inevitable in these sorts of hilly living areas. But I do agree with you. If you think that if the committee thinks a site visit is the way forward, then obviously a site visit would be the way forward, and it would be an opportunity if they wanted to for the neighbours to actually talk to us as well.
Chairman, going on with that, the reason I proposed a site visit was to get an understanding for future use as well as to the thinking and perspective of the planning officers. Also, I need to get an understanding of this site. As you know, we entered into planning with an open and transparent mind, and the only way that we can make a clear joined-up decision is by having a visit to the site. We have to walk in the same shoes, sit in the same places, look at the same views, and to then project whether screening or something else can be done. So again, I move a site visit. Thank you.
Councillor. Noted. Councillor Forsey, you got your hand up?
No, I haven't got my hand up, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor, can you stop a sec? Can you hold? Oh, Harvey. Sorry, Councillor Harvey.
I've been mistaken for a few things, but never Councillor Forsey. I agree with what Gavin had to say, and I'm not objecting to a site visit, but I can't see the point of a site visit. See what I mean? I can see what's on the photographs, and if the gentleman have already come up with a solution to stop overlooking into the garden by putting whatever he wants to put there, but whether it's a fence or trellis work or whatever. So I'm not against the site visit, but I just see it's pointless if we're going to turn up there and say, yes, well, if he puts his trellis work here or he puts his screed in here, it's going to stop the overlooking to the garden is, well, I'm quite baffled by it. I'm quite baffled by it's been brought forward to the council, to be honest with you. That's just my comments. Thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Perkins?
So, on that photo there, the fencing, which property does that fencing belong to? And is, because it's not, it doesn't look to be the full height that fencing could possibly be put on on a person's property, but obviously from the lower level it would look huge, whatever it is. And then on the other photograph where you're showing from tier 3, there is an obvious, so those photos there, you can see that they have lowered tier B, so that would take out some of the overlooking from the original garden.
So, in part, so the difference here is because of the works that have been carried out to change the ground levels. So the relationship has changed. So if you note from the photograph on the left, where you have more of a standard height fencing, and then the photograph on the right, because that level has been increased, the fence doesn't have the same impact in relation to mitigation. So because the levels have been altered, does that make sense?
Has the level been increased? Because B has definitely been decreased.
So if you're looking at photograph on the left and then the photograph on the right, where we've had the formation of these terraces, that has changed the impact and the level, so that there is an element where you're able to then look over the fence. So if you note, the existing ground level is shown with the red dotted line, and then the current ground level is shown with the black line. You can see that the relationship with the fence has altered. So we have this greater degree of overlooking because the ground level has been altered, and we can then, it affords views over the fencing that previously did not exist.
But the condition, if we conditioned the screening there, that would mitigate that out again?
If you thought that that was sufficient, however, I would just be mindful of the impact of high-level screening on the neighbours. And again, so, you know, it's our assessment of this is that the works that have been carried out have an unacceptable impact in respect of overbearing and loss of privacy. So, again, if these works previously, these issues did not exist, so now we're trying to remedy and mitigate for the harm that arises from the development, and we don't consider that that's sufficient or acceptable. And that's why it's recommended for refusal.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Cox, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I'm going to make 2 points, really. One is about whether the neighbours have objected. I mean, obviously, the comments of neighbours and local residents are important, but, I mean, a judgment has to be made, and clearly they have to relate to issues that are related to planning. But I don't think that, well, I'm not happy actually with actually saying that because the next door neighbour does not object, then it's okay to proceed, because we're not planning because the the arrangements, at this particular moment, suit a particular applicant and particular neighbours. We're talking about the long term, and in the long term, that issue still remains. The other issue I just wanted to make a brief comment on is there was a picture there where there was a kind of a sort of balustrade looking down.
If you let me know which one.
Yeah, no. That one, if we go back. So I take it the sort of balustrade is taken from within the curtilage of the applicants.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
and the house we're looking down on is next door.
Is next door.
Right.
So that's where there's an area of planter that's proposed there, but that's the current impact.
Right. Okay. I mean, because I'm just thinking about this. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion around the details, but the councillors here are not professional planners. Presumably, we're brought here to apply a bit of good old common sense to some of these decisions. And the overwhelming feeling I get is that if I was the neighbour, I would not be happy full stop with that. I'd feel there was real intrusion on my privacy.
Thank you, Councillor. I believe, moving on, we've all had questions now. I go back to Councillor Rheoli's proposal for a site meeting. Could I ask for all those that are in favour of a site visit? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Can we have Councillor Rheoli's proposed. Can we have a seconder for the site visit, if you minded to? Councillor Horton, is that your hand raised? The seconder? Should we propose a seconder? Show of hands, all those who are in favour of a site visit? 2. All those against? 3. Oh, and myself? I think I'll go for a site visit. Oh, sorry. Sorry, can I take the vote again? The proposal for a site visit. Can I have a show of hands? In favour of the site visit. 1, 2, 3. And those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, Councillor Harrod. So that's carried. Sorry. Ah, okay. Yeah, okay. Sorry. So that is not carried. So we'll go now for officer's recommendation. Vote on officer's recommendation.
First off, Chair, can I have a point of
sorry, Councillor. Could you stop a minute?
No.
Councillor, can you hold the line?
It's on a legal point regarding Councillor Forsey. When I presented at a committee on behalf of a resident, you may remember I was asked to leave the room whilst the committee made and voted upon their decision, because my presence may or may not have had an impact on the outcome of the decision, and I had to step outside the council chamber whilst committee deliberated. Was that just me, or is that just, was that just a personal thing to me, or are you allowing other members now to stay inside the chamber?
Oh.
And I'm doing this to try and protect the planning committee.
Councillor, can I let the legal officer answer your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Outley. No, you were asked to leave the room because you were a member of committee. Councillor Forsey isn't on the committee. So it's the same as if Councillor Forsey was in the chamber here with us. We wouldn't ask her to leave. But any member of committee, and certainly not personal to you, any member of committee who elects to speak as ward member instead of be on committee will be asked to leave the room.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, because I spoke that day as a ward member, not a member of the planning committee. I had no vote, if you remember.
Yes, exactly. But the undue influence is because you are a committee member.
Ah, right.
And not as just ward member. Yes.
And I accept that. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for that clarification. Councillor Forsey, I'm so glad I got you off the hook. You were never on it in the first place.
Could we move to a proposer, please, for the officer's recommendations now to refuse the application?
Is there a proposer?
Yeah. Do we have a proposer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a seconder?
Yeah. So we have a seconder for the refusal. So we are okay. So all those in favour of the refusal? Sorry. Yeah? All those in favour?
No, of the officer's recommendation.
Refuse?
The officer's recommendation is to refuse.
So the officer's recommendation is to refuse. So...
Yeah, start again.
Go on, Tracy.
Sorry, Chair. Just to clarify, the proposal that we're considering at the moment is to go with the officer's recommendation, which is to refuse the application. So that's what's been proposed, and we've invited a seconder on that, and we're just about to go to a vote on that. So just to clarify, that's what everybody will be voting on, is to go with the officer's recommendation to refuse the application.
Yes, that's correct. So now we'll go to the vote on refusal.
Is there proposing that?
But you proposed to refuse the... Ah.
That's a different motion.
Okay. Is there a seconder? No?
So just to clarify, Councillor Watkins is proposing that we grant the application.
Yeah.
So Chair, we need a seconder for that.
Yeah, there's a seconder to grant the application. Right, Councillor Horton.
Tracy, do we need to say what conditions?
Yeah, okay. We need clarification on the reasons for the conditions. What conditions are we putting on?
If we were to go against officer recommendation and grant the application, we would just need to clarify whether there may be any conditions that members would like us to impose. So we've discussed some things like the screening, or alternatively you can just grant it as is seen, as it's a retention application.
Okay. So, which conditions would you like to put on this application that you now granting? Is there any?
There has to be some form of screening.
Yes.
As per the drawings which were displayed, definitely there has to be some form of screening put up there, yes.
So you're asking for screening, which tiers?
So the screening is proposed on the plans. So what I would suggest is if the committee is minded to grant the application, that we would have a standard conditions for referencing the plans as submitted, one for the installation of the planters as proposed, and one in relation to the maintenance plan as suggested by the agent who spoke earlier, for that ongoing management and retention of those planters. That would be my suggestion to the committee.
To me, that sounds very sensible and perfect. Thank you.
That's what I was considering, Chair.
Right, so recommendation is to go with granting it with conditions. Now, yes?
With the conditions on the screening, and it's to be maintained for at least 5 years.
Okay. Councillor Pickens?
Can we add to that it is a living screen, not some wooden fencing or so? Can we make it a living screen? Hedging?
Yes, so what I would suggest is that we have a condition for the installation within a certain period of time, perhaps with additional details relating to species mix and a maintenance plan to be submitted and approved by the local planning authority.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go for the vote. Yeah. Now we'll go for formal vote on the granting of this application. All those in favour to go with the granting of this application, please raise your hands. I'm going to go refuse. You got 1, 2, 3, 4 for granting the application. 1, 2, 3. He's not voting.
No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 3 on the screen.
So there's 5. Oh, 3. Sorry. So there's 5 granting. Go for granting the application. For those to refuse, 2. So it's carried to grant the application. We got there in the end. With the conditions added, yes, certainly.
Could we have a break, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly, yeah, we'll have 5 minutes. We'll come for break.
Thank you, Chairman.